Josh Phillips. Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, known as Josh to his friends, had left for school on November 10, 1998, when his mother decided to clean his room. She found a wet spot under his waterbed and assumed there was a leak. Upon further investigation, Miss Phillips found the body of 8-year-old Maddie Clifton. Josh had been playing with Maddie when a baseball hit her in the face, causing her to bleed. The panicked Josh then took her to his room and strangled her with a phone cord. He then hit her with a baseball bat and stabbed her 11 times in a bid to avoid getting in trouble. Josh Phillips was arrested at school and sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder. Eric Smith was barely a teenager when he lured 4-year-old Derek Robbie into the woods of rural New York in 1993. The 13-year-old Smith then strangled the toddler and dropped the boulder on his head. He then sodomized the lifeless body with a stick. Eric Smith was diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder and sentenced to 9 years to life in prison. His next parole hearing is in 2018. Jesse Pomeroy. Jesse Pomeroy is the youngest person ever convicted of first-degree murder in the history of Massachusetts. In March 1874, 10-year-old Katie Curran went missing from her South Boston home. While looking for her, searchers found the mutilated body of 4-year-old Horace Millen. Jesse's mother's dress shop was searched as part of the investigation, and they found the body of Katie Curran hidden in an ash pile. Pomeroy later confessed to the murders as well as 7 others. The 14-year-old serial killer was sentenced to life in prison, where he died of natural causes 58 years later. Barry Dale Lucatis. Frontier Middle School in Moses Lake, Washington was the scene of a deadly shooting on February 2, 1996. Dressed as a cowboy and armed with a rifle and 2 handguns, Barry Dale Lucatis wandered into his algebra class and opened fire on students. The 13-year-old fatally wounded 2 students and seriously injured 1 other before killing his teacher. Lucatis was heard remarking, "It sure beats algebra, doesn't it?" shortly before getting tackled by a hero gym teacher, possibly avoiding further tragedy. Barry Dale Lucatis was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, 1 count of first-degree attempted murder, and 16 counts of aggravated kidnapping, and was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 205 years without the possibility of parole. Lionel Tate. Lionel Tate is the youngest person to ever receive life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in the country's history. In 2001, aged just 13, Tate received the sentence for brutally battering 6-year-old Tiffany Eunick to death 18 months earlier. Just 12 years old at the time, Tate violently stomped on Tiffany repeatedly, lacerating her liver, fracturing her skull and ribs, and causing her brain to swell. She died of her injuries moments later. Tate initially claimed the injuries were caused by wrestling, however the coroner found them to be intentional, leading to his unprecedented sentence. Craig Pride. The Warwick Slasher was a name given to an American serial killer active from 1987 till he was caught in 1989. The slasher's first kill was in July 1987 when he broke into a neighbour's house and stabbed 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer 58 times, killing her instantly. In September 1989, he committed his second and most brutal attack. He broke into another neighbour's house and stabbed 39-year-old Joan Heaton 57 times. He then attacked her daughters. Her 10-year-old was stabbed 62 times and her 8-year-old was stabbed 30 times and her skull was crushed. When police caught up to the Warwick Slasher, they were shocked to find out it was 15-year-old Craig Price. Just 13 at the time of his first murder, he was high on marijuana and LSD at the time of the killing. Craig Price is due to be released in 2020. The Angela Wrightson Killers. On December 8, 2014, 2 girls arrived at 39-year-old Angela Wrightson's house, demanding she buy the 13 and 14-year-olds alcohol. The Hartlepool woman considered the teenagers as friends, so obliged and purchased the alcohol. The 2 girls then savagely beat the woman in her own living room in a brutal attack that lasted more than 9 hours. She received over 100 injuries from sustained attacks from various weapons, including a television, a coffee table, and a spade. The tragedy takes a horrific turn. After savagely slaughtering the vulnerable woman, the pair, who cannot be identified because of their age, took photographs on Snapchat of the half-naked body and sent them to friends. They then left the house and called the police, but not to turn themselves in. The teenagers asked the police for a lift home and moaned they were cold. Fearing they were vulnerable, the police gave them a lift home, not knowing the horrific act they just committed. The girls were sentenced to at least 15 years in jail each for their cowardly attack. John Venables and Robert Thompson. In a crime that truly shocked Britain, 2 10-year-old boys kidnapped and tortured James Bulger shortly before his 3rd birthday. The pair then cold-bloodedly dumped his body on a nearby train track. James was last seen leaving a shopping mall in Bootle, Merseyside with 2 young boys. The boys, who were playing truant from school, took James to an abandoned railway station. They poured blue paint in his eyes and stomped and threw bricks at him. The pair put batteries in his mouth and dropped a 10-kilogram iron bar on his head. The toddler suffered 42 potentially lethal injuries and was uncertain which actually killed him. For the horrific crime, John Venables and Robert Thompson were in prison until they were released in June 2001. John Venables was again jailed in 2010 for unrelated charges. Mary Bell. Brian Hay was found dead and covered with weeds just 6 days after the body of Martin Brown was discovered. Brown was just 4 years old when he was asphyxiated. His hair had been cut and there were puncture marks in his thigh and his genitals were mutilated. There was an M carved into his chest. On the 31st of July 1968, 3-year-old Brian Hay was discovered. His body was found in a similar condition and the location was identical to the previous murder. He too had an M carved on his stomach. The culprit, Mary Flora Bell, committed her first murder the day before her 11th birthday. There was some doubt whether she acted with her friend Norma Joyce Bell, who was acquitted. Mary Bell was released from prison under a pseudonym in 1980, Carl Newton Mahan. In 1929, times were tough and two boys were out looking for scrap to sell. 6-year-old Carl Newton Mahan and 8-year-old Cecil Van Hoos stumbled upon some scrap iron. Both friends argued over the iron when Cecil hit Carl in the face. Carl ran home with Cecil in tow and grabbed his father's shotgun. Carl threatened to shoot Cecil if he didn't go away. Seconds later, a shot was heard and Cecil was found dead. 6-year-old Carl was sentenced to 15 years in a Kentucky prison. However, this was later overturned and he was given a prohibition notice. That was Top 10 Youngest Killers, and this is #Nick. Thanks for watching.